watched, as the entire world watched, the riveting interaction between Vladimir Zelensky and Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. And at first I just saw the short clips where after, omitting the first half hour of their friendly interaction, I started watching really from when Zelensky challenged J.D. Vance, what do you mean by diplomacy? How do you accept Putin? He broke when Zelensky started talking back and sort of cross-examining J.D. Vance and talking over Trump. And I thought, ooh, talking over Donald Trump is not something that I don't think he's ever abided in his life. But if you look at the longer exchange, it felt like Zelensky wanted his cake and wanted to eat it too. And by that, I mean he wanted to be able to spar with Trump, disagree with Trump, maybe even embarrass Trump. Under his breath, he said bitch towards J.D. Vance, which is sort of a shocking lack of self-control. You can do that, but not if you're taking hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons and funding and U.S. intelligence. Like, you just have to pick a lane. And when he went to Europe the next day, and they said all the nice things to him, but none of them had the boots on the ground. None of them had the army, none of the weapons. And I think Zelensky, in his own way, was, he wanted all the good stuff of being a friend of America, but in return, maybe he wasn't. Like, you're never going to be America's equal, but you can be Batman to America. You can be Robin to America's Batman. That's how I put it. There's a senior partner and junior partner. There's no other country in the world, in the West, that's going to be equally as dominant to the hyperpower. But if you want all the benefits, like Canada gets the benefits of the free military protection. So maybe we shouldn't be so snippy towards Trump. Maybe we shouldn't insist on our 285% tariffs on U.S. dairy goods. Maybe we should allow American banks into our markets, which we don't really do. Maybe we should allow U.S. cell phone companies. So they're actually quite minor things compared to what we get from being America's best friend. But I think that for a generation, Joel, the entire world could sort of flick at the giant and just assume the giant didn't feel it or didn't notice it. And I think Trump is noticing, and he wants people to pick a lane. You can either spar with us or be on our team. You can't do both. The Europeans have been experts at doing both for a generation, and Canada too. We have an anti-Americanism in our blood. In fact, Trudeau, when he went down on, I think it was Anderson Cooper's show, he was asked, what's the definition of a Canadian? He said, not an American.
Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American.
As if that's a dirty thing to be. And
that's what I mean. Like, it's not good enough for Canada. It's not good for our relationship, but it's really, that's not what it can mean to be Canadian. I'm surprised he said that. I hadn't actually seen that.
Oh, he says that all the Canadians
not
all
an
the
American.
time say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my own life, people ask, what's the content of being a Jewish person, right? And if your only response is, well, I'm Jewish because of anti-Semitism, well, then you're letting this other thing define you, and it's no way to go, really. I mean, we all know
it's not a positive identity.
There's no content to it. I mean, you've got to have some kind of positive content to it. And I joke about Molsons and hockey and things like that, but Canada is a very special place. I mean, it's really a fantastic country with an incredible diversity of geography and experiences. But look, it is a northern country, and it has this vast expanse that is just incredible. I used to look at maps of Canada. We took a road trip once when I was a kid to Montreal, and we had a map of Canada. And I sat there in the front passenger seat next to my dad when he was driving our old VW van from Chicago through Detroit and then Toronto and Montreal, and just marveling at this vast wilderness and everything in it. And, Canada is an amazing, amazing place with incredible people. I flew up to Canada back in December, I think it was 2022, with my daughter to see a cousin of mine. I actually have cousins on both sides of my family in Toronto. And a cousin of mine was in a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And it was just so great to be in Canada. I mean, many things in Canada do feel comfortably close to what we're used to in America. But essence of being Canadian is something different. It's something special. And I'm not Canadian, so maybe I'm not the best place to decide what that is or ought to be. But there's something special about being Canadian, just as there's something special about being American, but it's not the same thing. And yeah, we should. An American, no one in the United States says I'm not Canadian.
Yeah, yeah. It would be. Although it seems weird.
You know, look, I do think national identity has to be more than the metric system and the addition of the letter U into certain words. I mean, you know, there's something to it, and you know, we have fun with it. We have fun with a little sibling rivalry, if you will, on the continent, and the hockey games. You know, were thrilling. I mean, you know, the Canadians deserve to win, I think, because even though they lost that first game, I saw in the Americans' faces in that hockey game that they didn't believe they could win it. It was weird. There was just an extra fight, I think, the second time around, which is good. You know, I think there's a very productive relationship to be had. I do think that the Trudeau version of Canadianism, if you want to call it that, is a kind of parody of a stereotype that Americans have about Canadians, which is that they're just too liberal and too alternative, and if I can be, you know, crude, I mean, too kind of unmanly. Yeah. I mean, the carefully coiffed hair and stuff, it doesn't actually represent any real Canadians you might encounter, but there's a kind of idea that, yeah, we're the kinder, gentler version of America. And I think, yeah, if that's how Trudeau styles himself, I'm not surprised that that's what his answer was. But, you know, Canadians are tough and Canadians are cool. And you know, some of the greatest, you know, things are done by Canadians. I mean, whatever. I'm starting to ramble here, and you have to forgive me on 3 hours of sleep.
Oh, well, listen, I'm grateful for your time. Yeah, let me throw something at you.
It's just, it's a special place that has to have its own identity on its own basis. And I think it does. And look, I just think that the key to unraveling this whole dispute is actually probably pretty simple.
Let me throw something at you. I don't know if I told you, but I just published a short book called Deal of the Century, The America First Plan for Canada's Oil Sands. Joel, let me just take a minute on that. About a dozen years ago, I wrote a left-wing book called Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands. And I took all the arguments from the left, who said they cared about the environment, peace, economic justice for workers, civil rights. And I said, okay, if you really believe those things, let's compare Canadian oil with oil from everywhere else in the world. And I put it to you that Canadian oil is the fair trade coffee of the world's oil industry. It was using left-wing values to make the case that don't buy from Saudi Arabia or OPEC or Russia, buy from Alberta. Now, I think it's time to make the America First case for Canadian oil. And I wrote the book trying to think, well, how does Donald Trump think? He thinks take world assets away from China. He talks about big real estate deals in Greenland or Panama or even Gaza. And he wants things in return for economic access to the States. So I thought, well, there's 170 billion barrels of oil in Canada's oil sands. That's enough to make all of America's fill all of America's import needs, to get rid of all the Saudi and other OPEC countries. Canada can fulfill it for 50 years, a 50-year deal, $13 trillion worth at today's prices. And I thought, sign a deal for all the oil. It's better than annexing Canada because you get the good stuff, the oil, without the hassle, you know, a French quarter that wants to be bilingual, the electoral college that's going to go Democrat most of the time.
I don't think, I mean, look, sorry to interrupt you. I don't even think you need to make, I mean, look, it's a wonderful case to make. I just don't think you even need to make that. I think there are certain symbolic issues that Trudeau took a stand on that did sour the relationship between the two governments. I remember just off the top of my head when he was asked, for example, would he honor an international criminal court warrant against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel? And he said he would.
Right.
I mean, that's just insane. It's insane. And the United States is not party to the International Criminal Court for that reason, because before they started going after the Israelis, they were coming after us.
Right.
The first people to be targeted in this way by the ICC were U.S. military personnel who had served in Afghanistan. And the ICC started investigating American soldiers. And that's when, under the first Trump administration, they slapped sanctions on the ICC and barred them from entering the United States and refused to issue them visas. And that was the reason Trump opposed the ICC. Now, we weren't party to the ICC anyway. It had no jurisdiction over Americans. But when they decided that jurisdiction didn't matter and the fact that we didn't sign a treaty didn't matter and they could investigate us anyway as a matter of customary international law, that's when Trump said, okay, enough is enough. We're going to protect our military. Trudeau then gives legitimacy to that court by saying, oh yeah, we'll honor these arrest warrants because, you know, we're signatories to the Rome Statute and we have to do that. I mean, that's so absurd. It's against American interests directly, and it's against Israel, obviously, but it also just suggests a Canada that has been overrun, not by liberalism, which, you know, we kind of laugh at a little bit and enjoy, but it's overrun by radicalism. And that's something I think that really put Americans off. So there are a few things like that, I think, that Trudeau did, and, you know, mocking Trump with Boris Johnson and so forth. Right. And, you know, in the last few days, you know, thundering about how he's going to defend Ukraine when you know, Canada has 63 fighter aircraft and they're going to send something like 16 or 17 to Ukraine. I mean, it's like, you know, a massive proportion of Canada's Air Force. I mean, you know, it's just, it's absurd.
They're 40-year-old jets, I should tell you. Joel, I don't even know if we have that many that fly. They're CF-18s from the 70s and 80s. Like,
yeah,
we no longer, sense. I don't know if you know this, Canada did not participate in the last European NATO exercises, the largest NATO exercises in years. Canada was not there because we could not interoperate. We didn't have the machinery or the men. Canada wasn't there.
Right. So Trudeau postures as this great friend of Ukraine, right? But he can't actually back it up. So I think that kind of thing irritates Americans. It irritates it because then it feels like you're doing that based on our defense and our economy, and, you know, you're dissenting from our way of doing things, which is your right, of course, but you're doing it while also benefiting from American protection and largesse. And I'm not trying to come across the wrong way. I'm just telling you how some Americans see Trudeau's antics.